Everyone believed Jonathan Parker had it all, the mansion that touched the clouds, the laughter of two beautiful children echoing through marble halls, and a fiancée who appeared to be the very picture of grace. To the outside world, he was the man everyone wanted to be. He had built his empire from nothing, late nights, long deals, missed birthdays, all for the sake of a future where his children would never have to struggle the way he once did. But as the cameras flashed and headlines praised his perfect life, something quiet began to break behind those golden doors. His daughter Emma, once full of light, started to wake in the middle of the night crying softly, clutching her blanket, whispering, "Daddy, please don't leave me." It started as a whimper he thought was a bad dream, but then came the change in her drawings. The family portraits she loved to make now had dark clouds over the mother's face and tears on her own. When Jonathan asked, she'd only lower her eyes and say, "It's nothing, Daddy. Please don't be mad." He wanted to believe it was nothing. He wanted to believe his fiancée, Rebecca, the elegant woman who had stood by him in the hardest months after his late wife's death, could never harm them. But the housekeepers whispered when they thought no one was listening. The children's tutor suddenly quit without explanation. And the youngest, 4-year-old Caleb, began to flinch when someone raised their voice. Jonathan's heart told him something was wrong, but his pride told him not to look too closely. After all, he was a man of status. He couldn't risk scandal, not with the wedding only weeks away. Still, the night Emma's trembling hand slipped into his and she whispered, "She hurts him when you're gone." Something inside him shattered. That night he didn't sleep. He sat in his study, staring at the old family photo from before Rebecca entered their lives, his late wife smiling, the kids sitting on his lap. The man in that picture looked happy. The man sitting there now looked lost. 2 weeks later, a new butler arrived at the Parker estate. No one knew that the man polishing the silverware, his hair hidden under a cap, his hands rough from forced humility, was Jonathan himself. He had dismissed most of the old staff under the pretense of renovations and hired a skeleton crew so he could blend in. The only one who knew was an elderly maid named Mrs. Miller, the woman who had raised him when his own parents couldn't. "You don't have to do this, Jonathan," she'd whispered when he told her the plan. But he only replied, "If I don't, I'll lose them, and I'd rather lose everything else first." For the first few days, he watched quietly from the shadows of his own home. Rebecca's smile was flawless in front of guests, her voice tender when the cameras rolled, her arms around the children when he called to check in. But when the doors closed and the house fell silent, the mask slipped. He saw it one afternoon, through the kitchen window while he was polishing the silver tray she never used. Rebecca's voice rose sharp like glass, scolding Emma for spilling a cup of juice. The little girl's apology was soft, trembling, and then came the sound that froze Jonathan where he stood, the slap, sharp and cruel, echoing through the marble walls. He dropped the tray, his breath caught, his eyes burning. But he couldn't reveal himself. Not yet. Not until he knew the full truth. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about how many times this had happened while he was away on business trips, trusting the wrong person with the most innocent souls in his world. He began keeping a small notebook, writing every detail, every word, every bruise he noticed on Emma's arm or Caleb's silence at dinner. He was gathering evidence, not for the police yet, but for his own conscience. Because deep down he still wanted to believe there was another explanation, some cruel misunderstanding that could make sense of it all. But there wasn't. And what he discovered in the weeks that followed would break his heart in ways he never imagined. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Why would a billionaire hide behind his own walls? What could drive a man like Jonathan Parker, a man whose name was synonymous with success and strength, to trade his $1,000 suits for a servant's jacket? What secret was so heavy that he had to erase his own identity just to uncover it? And who was Maria, the quiet maid whose trembling hands and watchful eyes seemed to know the truth long before he did? These questions haunted Jonathan every night as he moved through his own mansion, unseen and unrecognized. Each polished floorboard, each glimmering chandelier reflected the life he once had, the one everyone envied, but now felt like a cage of gold. Every sound inside that house carried a story. The sharp echo of Rebecca's heels on the marble floors signaled fear for the children. The soft whimper of Emma's voice behind closed doors made Jonathan's heart tighten. He saw it all now, not as the powerful head of the house, but as a ghost in his own home. The days that followed felt longer than any he had lived. Rebecca's words dripped with sweetness whenever the cameras or guests were near. But when she thought no one was watching, her tone changed. Cold, impatient, demanding. Jonathan began to see her for who she truly was, but the question remained, why? What could twist someone's heart so cruelly against two innocent children who had only ever wanted to love her? Then there was Maria, the maid who had been with the family for nearly a year. Jonathan remembered the day he first met her. She had been shy but kind, always gentle with the children. Now, as he worked quietly beside her, he noticed things he never had before. The way she would step between Rebecca and the children during tense moments, pretending to fix a napkin or pick up a toy just to create space. The way she looked at Emma, as if silently promising to protect her. It was in those small, careful gestures that Jonathan began to understand. Maria was the only one who saw the danger for what it was. But how much did she truly know? Late one evening, as Jonathan cleaned in the corner of the grand hallway, he overheard Maria whispering to Emma in the kitchen. "You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart," she said softly. "You're a good girl, okay? Don't let anyone make you forget that." Emma nodded, wiping her tears quickly before Rebecca's voice called from the next room. Maria's face went still, her eyes full of quiet fear, and she turned back to her work as if nothing had happened. Jonathan stood frozen, torn between the instinct to reveal himself and the fear of making things worse. What was Rebecca hiding that made everyone so afraid to speak? The questions clawed at him with every passing day. What kind of person had he invited into his family? How long had this been happening under his roof? And why was Maria, the one person brave enough to care, so determined to keep silent? The walls that once protected them now held secrets too dark to ignore, and Jonathan knew the truth was waiting, just beyond his reach. But when he finally uncovered it, nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Just months ago, Jonathan Parker had been a widower trying to rebuild a family. After his wife's passing, the mansion on the hill had fallen silent. No laughter, no warmth, only the sound of clocks ticking in empty rooms. He buried himself in business, expanding his empire to mask the grief that followed him everywhere. But money couldn't fill the empty chairs at the dinner table or the quiet ache in Emma's eyes. Then came Rebecca, a striking, eloquent woman known for her charity work and grace. To the outside world, she was everything Jonathan could have ever wanted: compassionate, poised, and the kind of woman who seemed to bring light wherever she went. At first, it felt like a miracle. Rebecca swept into their lives with confidence and charm, turning the mansion into a home again. She redecorated the parlor with fresh flowers, cooked with the staff, and even helped Emma with her school projects. For a while, Jonathan believed he had found the missing piece his family needed. The dinners were warm again, the laughter of his little girl filled the halls, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel hope. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. The warmth in Rebecca's smile began to fade, replaced by something colder, more measured. The dinners that once felt like home began to feel like performances. It started with small things. Rebecca's soft corrections at the dinner table, her subtle comments about how Emma should learn to be more proper. Then came the moments when Jonathan wasn't home. Sharp whispers, raised voices, the sound of Emma's chair scraping against the marble as she hurried to her room. The mansion that once glowed with light now carried a tension you could feel in every breath. The servants noticed too, but no one dared to speak. Only one person's eyes told the truth. Maria, the maid. Maria had come from humble beginnings, working since she was a teenager to support her family. She was gentle and quiet, yet there was strength in her that most people missed. She knew what fear looked like. She had seen it in her own reflection once, years ago, when she worked for a family that treated her as less than human. And so, when she saw the flicker of fear in Emma's eyes, something inside her stirred. She couldn't look away. Maria began noticing details others ignored. The way Emma flinched when Rebecca's voice grew sharp, the nervous way the little girl hid drawings under her bed, and how she avoided certain rooms entirely. Maria never asked questions out loud, but her silence was heavy with understanding. Around her neck, she wore a small, worn pendant, a keepsake from her late mother, engraved with one word: courage. Whenever she felt powerless, she touched it. A quiet reminder that bravery didn't always come with loud declarations. Sometimes it was simply choosing not to look away. And every night, as she tucked Emma into bed and whispered, "You're safe now," Maria began to wonder if that was still true. Because she could feel it, the house was changing, the air was colder, the laughter had vanished, and behind Rebecca's perfect smile, something dangerous was beginning to surface. Jonathan didn't see it yet. He wanted to believe in love, in second chances. But what he didn't know was that the woman he had trusted to heal his family might be the one tearing it apart from the inside. One quiet morning, the sound of clinking silverware filled the grand dining room. Jonathan Parker, now disguised as the butler, stood near the window pretending to polish a glass. The morning light streamed through the tall curtains, soft and golden, but the warmth it carried didn't reach the table. Across from him sat Rebecca, elegant as always, her hair perfectly tied, her smile sharp as glass. And beside her, little Emma, hands folded, eyes down, silent. Something about the way the girl sat, tense, motionless, told Jonathan that the rumors whispered by the staff weren't rumors at all. He'd been living inside his own home for a week now, unseen behind the disguise. Every night, he cleaned the very halls he once owned, and every morning he watched the woman he loved become someone he no longer recognized. Still, he prayed he was wrong, that grief had clouded his judgment. But that morning, all hope slipped away. Rebecca's patience snapped over something as small as a glass of milk spilled by trembling hands. The sound of the cup shattering against the marble floor echoed through the room like a gunshot. "Eat it!" Rebecca hissed, her tone cold enough to freeze the air. "Eat it, or starve!" Emma froze, tears filling her eyes. The tiny fork shook in her hand. The silence that followed was unbearable, thick, suffocating. Maria, standing near the pantry, flinched at the words but dared not move. She caught Jonathan's eye across the room, a fleeting moment of shared pain, and that's when he felt it. Pure helplessness. His hand trembled as he wiped the same glass over and over, trying to contain the storm raging inside him. He wasn't a billionaire at that moment. He wasn't a man of power or prestige. He was a father, watching his child break. Inside, his heart screamed to act, to reveal himself, to protect her. But he knew if he did it too soon, he'd lose the one chance to uncover the full truth. So he stayed still, silent, every muscle trembling with restraint. Maria's eyes lingered on him for a moment, as if she sensed there was more to this quiet butler than he let on. Rebecca sat back, smoothed her dress, and with a chilling calmness whispered something that turned Jonathan's blood to ice. "You know, Emma, if your mother were still alive, she'd be ashamed of you." Jonathan's grip tightened so hard around the glass it nearly shattered in his hands. That single sentence, cruel, deliberate, and venomous, ripped through him like a blade. He had loved Rebecca because he believed she carried kindness. But in that moment he realized the woman at his table had no trace of the compassion she once wore so well. Emma broke into silent sobs, her small shoulders shaking as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mommy." And Maria, unable to hold back any longer, stepped forward with quiet defiance. "Miss Rebecca," she said softly, "the child didn't mean to." "Silence," Rebecca snapped. "You're here to serve, not to speak." The tension crackled through the air. Jonathan's chest burned with every breath he took. He knew then that this wasn't an isolated outburst. This was the truth behind the walls he once called home. And as Rebecca turned her gaze toward the window, Jonathan's reflection caught her eyes for just a second, his expression unreadable, but filled with a pain that words could never describe. In that instant, he made a silent vow. The charade would continue, but only until he uncovered everything, until he knew how deep her cruelty ran. Because the woman sitting before him was not just his fiancée. She was the danger he had unknowingly brought into his daughter's life. But what Rebecca said next would haunt him forever. "If only she wasn't here," she muttered coldly, her gaze drifting toward Emma. "Maybe then you and I could finally be happy." The words struck Jonathan like thunder. His heart stopped, his vision blurred, and he nearly dropped the glass. It wasn't just cruelty anymore. It was hatred. And at that moment, Jonathan knew he couldn't wait much longer. The truth had to come out. But how could he protect his daughter without losing everything he'd built? If this story has your heart racing, comment, "I'm still watching." Let's see who's truly following till the end. The following weeks felt endless inside the Parker mansion. Every smile, every conversation, every dinner carried a quiet war beneath its surface. Jonathan Parker, still disguised as the butler, moved through the house unseen, his every breath calculated, his every glance cautious. He had discovered the truth, but that truth chained him in silence. The man who once ruled boardrooms now lived like a shadow among his own servants. Maria noticed first that something had changed. His posture, his eyes, the way he lingered near the children just a little too long. She didn't know who he really was, not yet, but she sensed that he wasn't just another worker trying to earn a wage. And when she began to see the bruises on Emma's arm, faint but undeniable, she knew she couldn't stay quiet any longer. One afternoon, while serving tea, Maria slipped a folded napkin beneath the silver tray. Written in trembling handwriting were the words, "She's hurting them. Be careful. Don't let her see you watching." Jonathan found the note hours later, his hand tightening as he read it again and again. He didn't know how Maria knew what he had already begun to suspect, but her courage gave him strength. From then on, she became his silent ally. Each day she left small clues, fragments of what she saw and heard. And each night, Jonathan gathered them like puzzle pieces, his anger growing heavier with every discovery. But every act of kindness brought new danger. Rebecca began to sense the shift in the air, the nervous glances, the quiet exchanges between Maria and the butler. Her suspicions grew like poison. Her voice, once smooth and gentle, turned sharp and watchful. She started entering rooms without warning, asking questions that carried hidden traps. Maria's hands would shake as she worked. Once, while cleaning the silver, she whispered without looking up, "Sir, please. If you expose her too soon, she'll take it out on them." Jonathan paused, his voice low, steady, but breaking beneath the weight of restraint. "Then I'll stay," he said quietly. "As long as I must." And so he endured it, every insult, every cruel command from the woman he once thought he loved. He stayed close to Emma and her little brother, finding ways to protect them without revealing himself. He fixed broken toys, tucked them in when no one was watching, and stood guard outside their door at night, hidden in plain sight. Every night he slept in the servants' quarters, listening to the sound of his children's muffled sobs through the walls. Each cry tore a deeper wound into him. There were moments he nearly broke, when Emma called out for her late mother in her sleep, when Rebecca's laughter drifted through the halls while his daughter's tears went unseen. But one night, the crying stopped. Jonathan woke to silence. No soft sobs, no whispers, only the sound of wind brushing against the window. Panic gripped him instantly. He rose from his narrow bed and rushed down the dark corridor, heart pounding. Maria met him halfway, her face pale, her voice shaking. "She took them," she whispered. "Rebecca took the children." Jonathan's world froze in that moment. The air left his lungs, his vision blurred, and every ounce of composure he had built shattered in an instant. He had waited too long. The woman he trusted had made her move. And now, his children were gone. When Jonathan Parker burst into the children's room, his heart pounded so violently it drowned out the sound of the rain outside. He expected to find Rebecca there, the woman he once trusted, the woman he now feared. But what he saw instead stopped him cold. Maria was kneeling on the floor, shielding Emma and her younger brother behind her, tears streaking down her face. Her arms were spread wide like a shield, trembling but unyielding, and beside them, resting on the edge of the bed, was a folded letter, one Jonathan hadn't seen in years. The handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to his late wife. He froze. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The familiar cursive pulled him back to a time before all of this, before Rebecca, before the mansion turned cold. Slowly, he unfolded the letter with shaking hands. The paper was worn, the ink slightly faded, but the words hit him with the force of a storm. "Jonathan, if you're reading this, I hope our children still laugh the way they do now. Promise me, no matter what happens, that you'll keep them safe, even from those who say they love them." His chest tightened. He remembered the night his wife had written those letters, a few short months before her illness took her away. She had written several, one for each child and one for him. But those letters had disappeared after she died. He had searched for them for months, assuming they'd been misplaced by the staff. Now one sat before him, stolen, hidden, and used. Maria's voice broke through his thoughts. "She found them, sir. All of them. She's been reading them for months." Jonathan turned sharply. "Rebecca?" Maria nodded, her face pale. "She used them, Mr. Parker, to make you believe she understood your grief, to make you trust her. Every word she said about your wife's last wishes, they came from those letters." Jonathan's knees weakened. His mind replayed every moment. Rebecca's gentle tone when she'd mentioned his wife's final words, her uncanny knowledge of private memories he'd never shared. It was all a lie, a manipulation built from the deepest parts of his pain. The door creaked open. Rebecca stepped in, her calm composure gone, her face twisted with fury and disbelief. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. Her eyes darted to Maria, then to Jonathan. "You were supposed to be at the estate meeting." Jonathan straightened slowly, the disguise of the humble butler fading with every breath. His voice was calm but edged with fire. "I canceled that meeting days ago." Rebecca's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Jonathan took a step forward. "I'm not the butler." His voice grew steady, stronger. "I'm their father." Rebecca stumbled back, the color draining from her face. You were watching me?" Every second, he said. Every word. Every moment you thought no one else could see. The room went still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Emma clung to Maria's skirt, her small hand gripping tight. Maria didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on Rebecca, ready for whatever came next. Rebecca's voice trembled, no longer the polished, charming tone she once wore. "You don't understand. I did it for us." "For us?" Jonathan interrupted, his voice breaking. "You did this for control, for power. You used my wife's memory to manipulate me, to poison this house, and to hurt the very children you claim to love." Rebecca's mask finally cracked. The rage she had kept hidden for months erupted, but Jonathan no longer felt fear, only sorrow for the love he had wasted and the innocence she had stolen. She tried to speak, but Jonathan's voice cut through the silence once more, cold and final. "It ends tonight." Rebecca's eyes flicked toward the doorway as if considering escape, but Maria stepped forward, her hand raised slightly, steady despite her fear. "You've done enough harm," she said quietly. "Leave these children alone." For the first time, Rebecca hesitated, not because of Jonathan's power, but because of Maria's courage. The simple maid who had always been invisible now stood as the wall she couldn't break through. And in that moment, Jonathan understood something his late wife had always known, that true strength didn't come from wealth or status. It came from compassion, from the quiet bravery of people like Maria who stood their ground when no one else would. When the police drove away that night, the mansion fell silent for the first time in months. The echoes of shouting, of fear, and of heartbreak were gone, replaced by something fragile but real: peace. Maria stands near the doorway, holding her old pendant in trembling hands. She's unsure if she still belongs here. Jonathan steps toward her, his face no longer the weary mask of a man pretending to serve, but the calm, grateful expression of a father who has finally come home. Jonathan, gently. "Maria, you saved my family. Let me help you save yours." Maria lowered her eyes, tears forming. She'd never expected kindness from a man of his world. For months, she'd risked everything, her safety, her job, just to protect the children who had become like her own. For the first time since losing his wife, Jonathan understood what she'd meant in her last letter. That love isn't about how much you give, but how much you're willing to protect. Maria watching from the balcony as Jonathan and the children chase each other across the lawn. She smiles softly, knowing her place was never about the paycheck. It was about the hearts she helped keep alive. Jonathan calls out to her, "You'll always have a place here, Maria. Not as the help, but as family." In a world blinded by wealth, it took humility, courage, and love to see the truth. Because sometimes the richest man is the one who finally learns who to trust. What would you have done in Maria's place? Would you risk everything for someone else's children? Children you weren't bound to by blood, but by love and courage? It's easy to say we'd all do the right thing, until doing the right thing costs us everything. Tell us in the comments, what choice would you have made if you were Maria? Your thoughts inspire our next stories, and your words remind us why compassion still matters in a world that often forgets it. And if you thought this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear what happened when a mother's lullaby exposed her family's darkest secret, a truth buried for over 20 years. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what happens next.